Hello, all of you. I hope you're in the mood for a good time today because in just a couple moments, I am going to bring in my guest today. I'm so excited and honored. Her name is Joan Hamburg, and you know her from as the first lady of radio. Oh, anyway, I'm going to give her a proper introduction. But first, I know you don't want to miss any of this. There's so many places to watch this, YouTube, all over the Facebook 3 pages. If you were watching me on the Hanging with Langan, a group Facebook page, what I would like you to do, we want to make sure we see your comments and questions. So you simply, so easy, StreamYard.com/Facebook. StreamYard.com/Facebook. You just click on the blue button and we'll be able to see your name along with your comment, which is fantastic. And also, if you're watching this, wherever you're watching this, I ask that you share this. Start a watch party. This is too good for people not to see. So you do that for Maureen Langan, and we will be here for you. So I have to tell you this. In radio, people have always asked me, from the days I began at Bloomberg to just my entire career, who is somebody you look up to, who you aspire to, emulate? And I always said Joan Hamburg, because she is considered the first lady of radio, and rightfully so, because she interviews anyone and everyone, not so much the politicians, but for over 4 decades. Just a general interest broadcaster and talk show host, Broadway stars, everyday New Yorkers, and she makes all of us feel equally welcome. And I know, because I have been on her show a few times, and you feel like you've known her your entire life, which is what makes her so very special. Restaurants, theater, shopping, news. The great Carol Channing called her the Yellow Pages of the world. Her daughter says now she would be considered the Yelp of the world. And in this insane world, she is a respite, a balm, and your friend on the radio. 35 years, the Joan Hamburg Show on WOR Radio in New York City, now heard on WABC on Sundays from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, streamed worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a warm, rousing welcome to the StreamYard stage, the gifted and talented Joan Hamburg.
How are you?
You know, beside myself, that you're joining me, right? You know this.
I'm very happy to be here. I've known you a long time and watched you work, whether it's radio, stand-up, whatever. You do it all. No, and it's a gift, I always tell people the secret is to write new on the soapbox. They're not reinventing the product. They're just writing new, and that's what it takes in this crazy business.
Well, I have so much I want to gab with you about, but as I said, in this crazy, bloviating male world, I found a quote from 1994 in the New York Times from Betty Friedan, The Feminine Mystique.
Right.
She's quoted on an article about you in the New York Times. Talk radio is so outrageously male-dominated, anti-woman, racist, anti-gay, it spews hatred. Joan Hamburg is different. There should be more women who deal with life-affirming events. I could have written this about you today.
Thank you. It's funny. I met Betty way in the beginning of her becoming Betty Friedan. I was writing copy at an ad agency, Batten, Barton, Durstein, and Osborne, and her then husband was involved with some of the work we were doing. And Betty was incredible. We used to have salons at her house, a little house in Sag Harbor, every Sunday, where everyone and anyone would just hang out and talk. And radio, when I started, there were women on radio, and there were a couple of guys yelling and screaming, but it's changed. Now there are a lot of guys yelling and screaming, and there are women, but not as many, because when I was a kid in this business, you remember a guy, you're probably too young, Bob Grant?
Yeah, Bob Grant was the first screamer.
Right? The first screamer, he'd yell, "Get off my phone."
Mm-hmm.
And people would be so scared of him. And then he'd finish yelling, and I would be walking by the studio, and he'd say, "Hey, kid, can you get me a babysitter tonight?" It was like it never happened. "Would you bring me a coffee?" And that was Bob Grant. So yelling, screaming was part of his shtick, as he said. But he was basically a very decent guy.
Well, see, that's the thing too. It's a persona for so many, and some it isn't. And then they wind up getting these angry people on board. I had a radio show for a while. You know, we all for a while. You're the one who hasn't had it for, you do it forever. But you know, I was with a company and I had a co-host, another woman. They bring in these male consultants and they're like, you agree too much with each other. You have to like find topics where you go to battle. That's going to reel in the viewers and the listeners. I said, well, what about if we just are authentic and let that fall where it may? How about we try that? They don't want that.
No.
But you're authentic. And that's why I say, when people say, who do you love on the radio? And I am kissing your butt because I love you, but I'm not, as a professional, that's what I love doing, bringing in different types of people and stories and caring about the listener, not polarizing them.
And there are very few people doing that. Long ago, I decided I was not going to do politics. It's just too many people out there doing it and just yelling to hear themselves heard. So I said, I'm going to be the relief. You know, I'm going to tell stories because that's what we love about radio. I'm going to give you information, whether it's where you get bananas or how you get cheap theater tickets. Of course, now, no tickets practically for anything. But I chose a different route, and it's been really good to me. And I hope I've been good to my audience. I've had a great audience. And early on, I was at a lecture, and the guy who was the head of Sears Roebuck, it was Alter Radio people giving them advice. And he said, I tell all my people in all my stores, every single customer is your last customer. And treat that customer like you understand that, with respect, with love, with dignity. And then he turned to all of us and he said, it applies to you guys too. You've got to treat every listener as your last listener. And they'll respond. You know, don't be cavalier. Don't yell at them. Don't tell them they got to get off the radio or get off the phone or they're dumb politically or whatever. Just treat them like they're your good friend, your pal, your family, and it will pay you in spades.
But that type of person has gotten so disproportionately rewarded for that type of work, Joan. And I look around and I said, there was a new woman heading up Cumulus. And I reached out to her and I said, where are all the women? Where are we? Oh, we have plenty. I go, where? Like they're not, you're not taken seriously. It's like dismissed. I'm like, but where are they? And what do you see the future happening in radio, Joan?
Well, it's definitely not the future that I had. And maybe when you started out was still very much there. Today, no one says, I've got to be home at 10 o'clock or I've got to get up early to hear John Gambling or Sid and Bernie in the morning. They don't do that. They say, well, let's see, it's 4 o'clock. Whom do I want to listen to? They scream, they go at their convenience. Television too. They don't set a time, and that's the way I grew up. It's different. Today it's podcasting. It's taken it a step further. Everyone, his or her brother, has a podcast, right?
Well, yeah.
But that's become the new language. To me, radio is still going to be there for many reasons. People want to know the time, the news, instant, you know, when they wake up in the morning or they're in their cars. But it's definitely evolving. And you've got to evolve with it to understand. When I first started, there were so many engineers you could barely get into the studio. Now, all the kids who are the producers, they're the engineers, they're the tech people, they're helping book the shows. They wear 10 hats, get very little money, but they're happy to do it.
Well, that's true. And now you're your own tech when you're doing your podcast. You're hitting the buttons, you're bringing in the graphic, you know, it's insane. But you have to take the bull by the horns and create your own product now because you can't wait around for somebody to go, here's your show, Maureen. You have to create your own. My guest is Joan Hamburg, WABC Radio, and Sundays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time and worldwide streaming. Just go to WABC.com. She's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And if you like what you're seeing, you folks, go to Patreon.com, Maureen Langan. Somebody was asking me, this was a question I had for you, Joan. As I look up to you as somebody who started when you did, I understand you looked up to an actress and radio personality, Arlene Francis. Now, that is a name from the past.
You know what? That's right. Kids today won't know who she was, but
let's tell them.
An old timer. There was a very popular TV show then called What's My Line, and she was one of the stars. She had a radio show with her longtime producer, Gene Bach, who was, believe it or not, one of the great people in the world of jazz. And Gene hung out with every famous jazz musician, and she booked Arlene, but she didn't just book Arlene. Frank Sinatra would come over all the time. Every famous name in the world was part of the Arlene Francis show. And Jeannie Bach, as the producer, did a lot of the heavy lifting. She did the research, the questions. And Arlene found me when I had written my first book with one of my college pals, New York on $5 a day.
Well, that'll be now.
Hard to believe it. But I wrote that book with Arthur Fromer, who was a litigator at a very famous law firm, still practically number one in the world, Paul Weiss Rifkin. He was a young litigation guy, and he wrote Europe on $5 a day to help pay for Yale Law School bills. So I went to Europe one college summer, took his book, and of course, like a lot of people, it was when he wrote it, and now it was a year or two later, there were a lot of mistakes. So as only someone young can do, I called him up at Paul Weiss, looked him up, and I said, "Oh, that book, so many mistakes. What a pain in the neck. I wrote a New York book for you without mistake." I mean, it was really nervy.
That was moxie, as my father, Huey from the South Bronx, would call it. You got moxie, kid.
And he didn't even hesitate. He said, "You know what? If you want to write a book called New York on $5 a day, I'll give you the title." There were two of us. One of my roommates, Norma, he said, "And I will pay for it and we'll self-publish." So we did. We wrote it. He self-published it. And within 2 months, we sold 35,000 copies of that book. And that's really, Maureen, what changed my life. Because all of a sudden, I was a writer, quote unquote, with a successful published book. And people like Clay Felker at New York Magazine were calling and saying, "Come write for us." And that's how it all started. That's my first radio gig.
And you were in college when you...
I was in my last year at Barnet.
And you said, smart, that's very good school. And you said, let me approach. And who did you approach about the $5 a day book?
Arthur Fromer.
Where's Arthur Fromer? I wanted to make sure I got that clear. Who was
And we've always kept up over the years. And now his daughter, Pauline, they've been on the radio too. And now, of course, travel is on hold.
Right.
So they're taking a little rest. But it was incredible. I traveled all over Europe with him. He truly is a keeper of the faith. Arthur is now in his 90s. He's spectacular.
He's in his 90s.
He's great. His head is unbelievable. He knows everything. And his daughter, Pauline, is sort of running the family business.
I always look at what they have to say when you travel, because their suggestions are always in line. Like, it's very accurate what they're sharing, whether you want to say somewhere fancy schmancy, or you want the best bang for your buck. Very good, Fromers. So that was, people wanted you to write. That got you known. 35,000 copies sold in 3 months, you say. So then what was your first radio gig?
Well, now I was working for New York Magazine, writing, doing specials, the shopping guide and the Weekend magazine, all that stuff. And I got a phone call from my editor saying, Clay Felker, who was the head of the magazine and a very famous figure in the magazine and publishing world, wants all of us to be more than we are. So he hired Gail Sheehy. None of them were what they grew up to be, you know, still sort of unformed in their careers.
Yeah.
And he was the one who pushed us. And he said to me, there's a radio station, has a very controversial host, and the host is causing them no end of grief. He's got big numbers, but they're being sued all the time. They're called every name in the book, and they don't want to get rid of him. They want to move him, and they want a non-controversial, probably unknown personality.
Wow.
10 to 12 out of the blue. So being a jerk, I said, I'm not doing that. You know, I'm perfectly happy writing my books and writing for New York Magazine and doing I was writing a column for Family Circle. I'm very happy doing all this. Plus I had a baby at that time. And they insisted I audition for this radio station.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I remember my husband was going to Europe on a business trip. And I thought, I'd much rather go to Europe than, you know, stay here and audition for some show I don't even want. I auditioned for the show. I have a huge family. All the relatives sent bag loads of mail. Who was that woman? 9:00 Sunday night. She was fabulous. I don't even know if they heard the show. I just sort of made it up. And a couple of weeks later, Peter Strauss, who was the owner of that radio station, called and said, how would you like to be the host of a 10 to 12, 5-day-a-week radio show?
And then you said?
I said, okay, I'll do it. And he said, do you know how to do it? I said, of course not. But I'll learn. And he said, there's a woman called Betty Cashton. She'll teach you. I'm going to send you to her. So he sends me to this wonderful woman who made the best coffee. I can still taste it. And she said, I can't teach you. I'm going to give you advice. Before you go into any show, and it's a loose show, meaning, you know, the phone lines are open, callers, you can have guests, but it's not one specific thing. Never go in without at least 4 or 5 things you can talk about. Read absolutely everything, she said. Don't just sit there. Because as a program director of that particular station told me, they have to love you or they have to hate you. You cannot be in between. You'll never make it. So I took her advice. I went armed with bags full of things to talk about. And that was my first little step in the world of radio. And it lasted a while. And then I went from there after a year or two to WOR radio.
So you weren't a baby when this started. You already had a career.
No, I already had a baby. I was writing successfully. I was writing copy too at BBD&O, the ad agency. I was doing Campbell Soup, Visit USA. I wrote copy for Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation. So I was doing a lot of stuff, but totally different from what I ended up doing. So, you know, open a door. Don't be afraid to go through.
Right.
Let it happen.
So my guest, Joan Hamburg, WABC Radio, Hall of Famer in the Radio Hall of Fame. Joan, so when you got your first radio gig, were you in your 20s, your 30s? I mean, this wasn't right out. I mean, you had this.
I wasn't out of college because I had written the book and I was doing all this writing. I think I was at the end of my 20s.
And you got a break then.
When it started. And it was the most unbelievable break when I think back.
It's a great break.
Right? How could that have happened? But
wow, some things are meant to be. So do you recall the fellow that you replaced on that Sunday night who they were like, we got to get?
I know very well. It was Bob Grant.
Oh, it was?
One guy. And he was being attacked by a lot of local papers. They called him a racist, you name it. He was being attacked for it. And it wasn't that he wasn't a brilliant broadcaster. He was one of the early great, you know. In fact, his first show was out of California with another very controversial guy called Joe Pines. He was before any of us, and it was in a totally different market, but that's where Bob Grant made his name. And then they brought him east, and the rest is history. He had a huge career. But I owe him a lot.
Because you got a slot?
I got a slot, and when I first got there, I can't tell you how awful he was to me, and I don't blame him. This unknown person comes in, not one of those people who was desperate for the job. I didn't even want the job. And he would flush a toilet under my promo. You know, an announcer would come on, and the Joan Hamburg show, and you'd hear, it was Bob Grant playing a flushing toilet to drown it out. But ultimately, we became friends. I helped him out. He had a bunch of kids, and he didn't know babysitters or anything like that in the area. And he said, in exchange, I'm going to teach you how to do commercials. And that was the best gift anyone has ever given me. A really life's lesson.
So do you believe in hindsight that he believed the things he said on air, or was that really more of a persona?
It was a performance. I mean, I'm telling you, he was a good guy. And he had this shtick, and it worked. And the truth is, he cared. The things that he yelled about were totally different from the things they're yelling about today. He didn't do furious politics or, you know, ready to get rid of the other side. He did co-op cities traffic problems or too much rent for people who couldn't pay it. He took care of every man if he could.
Interesting. Very interesting. But see, and all due respect to Bob Grant, you know, rest his soul, I don't want as much a persona. I want a real person. And that's why I think your audience has stayed so loyal to you. And you said, you know, these consultants or mentors will say people are going to love you or hate you. Of course, as any performer, any person in the public, you're going to have people who hate you. Right. But I think you would have far less than most polarizing people.
No, and my audience knows I really care about them. You know, to me, we have from the beginning been part of each other's family. And because I was on the air so much, then 6 days a week, 5 days with a couple of hours of show, stories in the morning, gambling show. And then I did a Saturday show, a food show with Arthur Schwartz. Arthur Schwartz, my radio husband, the great food maven.
I love that.
So we worked all the time. And what do you do on the air all the time? I used everyone as caricatures, my family, my friends, you know, all part of a life that we were living. You know, my generation, very rare to have a nanny. You know, I truthfully never even heard of that. I had a babysitter, and I would pay my babysitter when I got home from work. And she would, I remember Mary Wiley was her name, and she would race out of my apartment so she could pay her babysitter. And we helped each other out for years because we, you know, it was a different time.
I have there's a comment for you, Joan, and I know you've talked about this very openly. After 35 years at WOR, right. You were fired unceremoniously without even being able to say goodbye to your viewers. Do you want to talk about what that moment was like for you?
Well, I had been there, but WOR had been sold. It had been Buckley Broadcast. First, it was the O'Neills, and then the Buckley family from Connecticut took it over. And we had great times. They were great. And it was still a family. It was one of the few independently owned stations of that time because corporations and groups started to grab them up. So now the station was bought and sold. And they sort of got rid of everyone. and finally John Gambling, who was one of their big stars. And then I was like the last man standing at that point. And I should have known the handwriting was on the wall because they wanted to do their own thing, and bring their own people. It's like new management. When new management comes to a radio or TV station, everyone starts nervously packing their bags, worried about what's going to happen.
Though it's unheard of somebody being at one station for 35 years or there.
It's pretty unusual, although the Gambling family, that was this station, a family-owned station where everyone was a part of the family. And we were all friends. I still keep up with John R. and Joe Bartlett and all the crew. We all worked together for a lifetime, grown-up lifetime, our kids, everyone.
And Joe, good bunch of, it was a family. I always envy that. Like when I would listen to it, I wanted to be in there. I wanted to be on that other side of the mic in there because of how much it resonated and connected. What I don't like about this business, and this isn't unique to you, it's unfortunate that the day they let you go, you were about to go on air and they would not even let you say goodbye to your listeners.
No, that was really, I never really understood that. And it was a shock because I think when they called me in that they were going to call me in to congratulate me because I'm trying to remember, I think it was Tom Cruise or someone I had as a guest, coming up. It was some big name and they loved that. So I thought it was that, but no, they called me in to say whatever they had to say. But Cindy Adams, God bless her. A lot of people read her and think she's so caustic, she's this. She is loyal and a really good person. I didn't even know. She knew because that's what she does. And she called me. I said, I just came out of their office. How could you possibly know? She said, I know everything. And you better accept that. And I'm writing a column on this tomorrow. And she did. And I remember that my son was in from LA with his baby then. And I was meeting him in Chinatown. We were going to take her to Nomwa Tea Parlor. And as we're getting into Nomwa, the phone rings, and it was a woman from ABC Radio saying, now this had just all happened, earlier in the day or the day before. Don't take another job. We're going to offer you a job before tomorrow is over. I said, I don't even understand how everyone even knows this. I haven't told anyone yet. What is going on? She said, no, we all know everything. It's a small business in its own way, and we're going to offer you a job. So I'm just telling you, please don't take anything else. Like, take anything else. I didn't even get home to tell my husband. I'm eating dumplings in Nomwa.
I'm eating dumplings. I'm emotionally eating. I want people to know, if you're listening outside of New York, that WOR, a staple of New York City, and WABC. So she basically jumped to the sister station in 5 minutes over a dumpling.
Talk station over a dumpling. And I couldn't believe it. And again, I felt incredibly lucky because, it's the toughest thing for jobs. And the talk business is really changing.
Joan's very in demand. That's her phone. She's very, very in demand. Joan Hamburg, the first lady of radio. Truly, she is. So it is changing radio. And we talked a little bit about that, but I see it getting smaller, unfortunately. I feel it's getting less opportunity for different voices.
At this point in time, don't forget, we've just come off an election and we have to see what's going to happen. But you're right, in a way. It's sort of a one-song act all over Radio Land with a lot of people still doing yelling and screaming politics and stuff like that. I told you, I don't get involved in that. I'm a storyteller. There's a lot of stories to be told. There's a lot of books to be read, a lot of theater to be seen, concerts to listen to, social problems, dealing with kids. all the things that we all need to hold each other up and get through. And that's always been the magic of radio. TV is great, but it's walk, talk, and turn. I mean, my favorite is Aaron Baker. So,
well, when I was pitching my shows, and I've been fortunate to, I had a 7-year run on KGL in San Francisco, but I could do it from New York or where I was traveling to perform because of 5,000 of their sister stations. But I said, when I want to do something fun, heart, and smart, let's have some fun. Let's connect through the heart and let's be smart, not play stupid. Not like I'm reading an encyclopedia, but they change hands so much that you'll get one program director, we're going to syndicate you. Then you get the next one. Comedians aren't funny, not on air, not knowing that I was a journalist at public television and Bloomberg for a year. They don't get to know you. They don't. And then they change the weekends that are really the bullpen to groom people, and they put on Vitamin Vegemin commercials. It's like Lucy and Ethel. I mean, what's happening?
I must say that ABC, since it's been taken over by John Catsimatidis, has really changed in many ways for the better, because he took that weekend that you're describing, where there were a lot of so-called paid shows, or selling hair growth things, and he said, this is crazy. This is when people can really listen to the radio. They're going to work, they're in cars, or they're home. And I'm going to make weekends a destination. And he did.
Good.
And he all kinds of people on the weekends. So he's gotten rid of a lot of stuff.
Good. I'm glad to hear
a lot of stuff that you want to listen to.
Good. Joan Hamburg, my guest, WABC Radio, 2 to 3 o'clock Eastern time, on Sundays, but of course, streaming worldwide, all over the place. If you go to WABC.com, you'll be able to see the podcast. So one of the things that struck me in researching your background, I didn't know this about you. I know you called yourself a bit of a rebel. You were an off-Broadway actress, and you were caught in a raid. Who are you, Joan Hamburg?
Well, that was in the early days with New York on $5 a day. And my co-author and I were in Times Square, which, if you haven't been there way back, it was a really scary but funny district, not like it is now.
Not Elmo. There was no Elmo.
Exactly. And we were checking hotels for $5 a day. Believe me, not easy to find. And we go to one which looked like it would fit in our category, sort of a flea bag. And we go in, and all of a sudden we hear sirens, and we don't know what the heck is going on. And cops are rushing in. It was a raid, because it was sort of a house of prostitution on the side from guests. And here's my co-author and I, like, blinking in the light. And we see the cops, what's going on? And the cops say, who are you? Who are you guys? Because we didn't look like your normal hookers. And we literally had to call Arthur Fromer, who may not even remember, to verify, to say, no, these girls are not hookers. They're researchers and writers. Let them go. And so
let prostitutes go.
That was one of the early New York on $5 a day stories. But you know what, Maureen, and then you could go to a restaurant like Larry's French restaurant on 7th Avenue and have dinner for $6, a good dinner.
How much do you think you could do New York on a day these days? Not pandemic, but non-pandemic.
Well, we're not going to do it right now because it's an extreme.
No, it's terrible.
It's other when in its real lifetimes.
Yeah.
It's such an expensive town. You could probably get away if you had housing, with $50 a day, maybe even less. And now with Airbnbs and other things, people have other opportunities in terms of staying. It's still one of the great cities in the world.
It's the best. It's the best.
And I always believed, I didn't grow up here, but I always believed that anything was possible in this city. Anything. You had to pay your dues. You had to work. You had to learn to love rejection and step over it. But if you hang on, if you're really there and not whining or saying, oh, it's like women who call me, I need to meet a man. I say, well, what do you do? Well, I work and I go home. I say, trust me, he's not going to appear in your apartment. You've got to absolutely take yourself out and do something. And that's like work possibility to our town.
It's funny because I had a note here because one of the advice you used to give on the air, and I'm sure you still do, how to find a man. In the early days, it would be, with your roommate, get the chicken Hawaiian and pretend it's your own meal. But what advice would you give today in this crazy, insane world? We're not talking pandemic. Once this is over, advice when somebody calls you, I got to get a man. What do you say, Joan?
Well, I used to say to them, go take golf lessons, because the truth is.
Go take what?
Golf lessons.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of guys, no matter how you look at it, there's a lot of guys who play golf and who constantly are taking lessons, even the best golfer.
Right.
That still holds true.
Right.
It's a little more difficult because they're running around, a lesson is private. It's not a big range. But today, we had blind dates when we were kids. I've always went on blind dates. Today, everyone goes online. You speak to most people. There isn't any secret to it. They go online and there's a zillion places you can check out. Mm-hmm. And sports are still a way to meet guys. In New York, it's a little harder than most places because people work so hard. When they come home at the end of the day, they really are tired, which is why these apartment houses, these new ones, a lot of them in Brooklyn, have social rooms.
Yes.
Have places where you can have dinner if you don't want to be alone.
Right. Very interesting, because I was a golf widow, Joan. So I have a little bit of a different take on the golf. But I ran into about a 13-year-old kid. He was out doing those swing shots by himself on the sidewalk. I go, look at me, kid. You can be okay at golf. You can enjoy it, but your wife comes first. Got me? And he's like, oh, okay, lady. Okay. All right.
I know, it's very funny. But now there's so many women playing golf too. But whenever I go over to, and I must tell you, I love playing golf because I love being outside. I care more about the outside than I do about the golf, but it's a great way.
Well,
and even during this pandemic, when the weather held, you could play golf, because you're not on top of anyone. You're
out. You can enjoy yourself. I like being outdoors too. We used to do the Jersey Shore shares. That was a big thing back in the 80s and 90s as the Hampton shares. So you'd be with a whole bunch of friends, people you didn't know, renting the house next door, down the block. And I would go on the boardwalk. I was a big runner then. And my best friend said, I would just say hi to all these handsome fellas. I said, hello, hi, just keep running. My best friend goes, so many good-looking guys. I go, I don't know any of them, but we're going to run into them later at a party or dinner. And they're going to say, I saw you on the boardwalk.
And it's true. Yeah. Here, the big social place has become Montauk. Now, I've been out here a very long time, but Montauk was the wilderness, It was where you went fishing and the ocean was raging, or you went to Gosman's for lobster on the water. But now Montauk is it, and it's got a ton of young single people too. It's a good place to go if you can afford it. Like everything else, the Hamptons have gone through the roof.
I have a few more questions. You've been so generous with your time, Joan, but I do have a couple of more questions for you. And it's really about, you have such a long career. You're not quitting. You're not retiring. You're going nowhere. You're here to stay. You have interviewed so many people. Betty White, Hillary Clinton, Julie Nixon, Eisenhower. Who were some of those who stood out to you most that you just were like, wow, not the way they might have seemed, or something that connected for you?
I will tell you, because I just found something he sent me when I was cleaning out my bookcases. Richard Nixon. After everything happened, I interviewed him, and I had interviewed Julie, one of his daughters. And it was a good interview. He was very guarded, and obviously there were things he wasn't going to talk about. But a week later, I got a copy of a book he had written, and he had inscribed it. I can't tell you how grateful I am for your being so kind to my Julie. And I found it on my bookshelf. Truthfully, I had forgotten I even had it there.
Wow.
And it reminded me of what that interview was like. I have truly been lucky. I've covered almost every presidential election, not this one, but all of them. I've covered stars and non-stars because radio still is a powerful life force.
Yes.
And if we talk about a book, people really are going to go out and buy that book or go see that show because
Right.
you're their friend. You're whatever is important in their lives. Because WOR and ABC is so visible, you know, we were always on the road. We were more in the public, our public's eye than usual for a radio station.
Well, you just mentioned Nixon's daughter, but I have been on your show as an everyday, normal New Yorker, not famous. You've promoted my stand-up. You promoted my Daughter of a Garbage Man solo show. You welcomed me as a panelist down when you did your show live at the Jersey Shore.
Yeah,
I've been at Sardi's watching you. You really welcome everybody. And I mean from the bottom of my heart how grateful I am to know you and for what you put out there in this world when people are trying to be so polarizing and angry and butt heads. It is seriously a gift from God, as my Irish mother would say. So listen to me, you. I am so grateful for your time today. And I know this has been a hell of a year for you. And I know an anniversary of the passing of Skip is coming up. I send you tons of love and I wish you and your family all the best.
I'm so grateful. All the best to you. Good luck to you and your family. Never give up. Good things are always ahead.
Joan Hamburg, WABC Radio, ladies and gentlemen, Sundays, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, worldwide streaming, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Follow her at WABC.com and don't let her out of your sight. Mwah! All the best, Joan.
Thank you, my dear. Talk soon.
Take care. You guys, if you're liking what you're seeing here, support the show. This is the new way of working these days. It's crazy, but look how lucky we are to have somebody like Joan Hamburg on the show, or Alan Zweibel last week, the original Saturday Night Live writer, paypal.me, Malangan, Venmo at Malangan, and patreon.com/Maureen Langan. Get your Don't Make Me Hate You t-shirt, a lot of goodies. Next Tuesday, Shalom, Ireland. Valerie Lapin is joining me. She created a documentary about the Orthodox Jewish community in Dublin. It is fascinating stuff, and I think that you will love that. It's so fascinating. I love this stuff. There's Guinness bottles in Hebrew. It's unbelievable. And again, I thank all of you for being there. Thank you. Oh, you have so many great comments. And please, if you go to patreon.com, I really would like you to check out what I'm doing there. For $5 a month, you'll get access to all the video chats. $10, you'll get behind the scenes chats. $25, I'll send you a Don't Make Me Hate You t-shirt. Or if you don't want to subscribe, you can just get the t-shirts and my Don't Make Me Hate You masks. They are available to you at MaureenLangan.com. I have a store, a Redbubble store. And I'm doing a lot of corporate hosting, facilitating, and keynote and public speaking, in case you know anybody looking for that. I take my TED Talk and we tailor it for individual companies. And it's fun and smart and heart, all of that happy stuff. So there you go. I have to do my signature. Oh, a big shout out to Molly Barbara, my friend. It was just her birthday. Thank you so much, Molly, for being here. And thank all of you for being here. Please share. Let people know about Hanging with Langan. Okay, bye, Wig. Mwah.